All right, so it is currently exactly 7:45 on a Monday evening. Now, this is probably going to go out on a Friday at some point. I've had this channel going for best part of 5 years, and I've never done a full length Q&A video where I've opened it up and said ask me something, ask me whatever, and you could say you've done the lives, but see with lives now they're not really Q&As, they're more talk boxing, and normally I get over 150 to 200 people in a live, so it's very difficult to answer all the questions because they just come boom 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 boom. If I spend 15 minutes on a couple of questions, there's another 40 odd, and you're like, crap, I'm never going to get to all these. So this is a good one. Now what I've done is I've filtered this from newest to oldest, so I've gone straight down to the bottom and I've been able to get the oldest. So if I miss your comment, if I missed your question and you've put it in after this specific time, 7:45 on a Monday, it's not because I didn't read it or I didn't want to. It's just because I've already recorded it and there's no point starting again. Hence the reason I'm probably going to remove the post, because I don't want people to say, oh, you missed my question. It's like, when'd you write it? Tuesday. Well, it was recorded on a Monday. So we'll start with this. There's 56 comments, so I aim to try and do this in under 45 minutes. Hopefully. You never know. I haven't really, looked through these. And straight away I can see the first question. Of course this would be one of the first questions. Why do you and Ade love Joshua so much and hate Fury? Hate and love, huh? Love and hate. The word love a fighter doesn't really get thrown around a lot, but the word hate a fighter does. And I've always said, define hate. If someone says one thing 1 minute and then something the next, and you point that out, is that hate? No, you're pointing out inconsistencies. So Tyson Fury is he is the poster boy for inconsistency in terms of everything. Inconsistent performances, inconsistent, what he says 1 minute and then says something the next, contradicted himself. So me and Ade, we love Joshua and we hate Fury. Yeah, you're going to want to try a bit harder with that one. Next question. And by the way, I'll try and read some of the names out, but as you know, some of the names that I read on BoxRec are hard, much less YouTube names where some people put some bizarre tags on their names. Now this one is all numbers. It says, is Tyson Fury the worst thing to happen to heavyweight boxing since Don King? Now, with Don King, and Don King is a scumbag, complete and utter scumbag. You do kind of have to look at those cards he was doing in the 90s and say they weren't bad. Don King, in a not good way, and I'm not meaning this as a compliment to him, but he did get stuff done with the heavyweight division. He did rip a lot of. He's a horrible individual, Don King. Even now he's in his 90s. It's still just awful. He got stuff done. But Tyson Fury, is he the worst thing to happen to the heavyweight division? Tyson Fury is what Tyson Fury is. He, at one stage, very early on in his career, he was a very different character to what he is now. And certainly over the last, I want to say probably the last 4 or 5 years, it's not been easy. It's not been easy to watch. And the thing I always say about Fury is, when you look at Fury as an individual, the man, he definitely leaves a lot to be desired. But when you watch him and just watch him for pure boxing, what he brings to the table in terms of skill, honestly, he is one of the best. It's just so frustrating that someone of his talent, and maybe his talent is maybe on the decline now, but someone of his talent, did we get to see him in his prime years? Was he away from the ring during that time? You look and you think, God, there were so many fights he could have been in, and there's so many fights I would have picked him in. But nevertheless, he still has tremendous talent for a man of his dimensions as well. So, is he the worst thing to happen? No, I don't think Don King's the worst thing to happen to heavyweight division either. Next one, Cam D. Hey G-Man, what inspired you to start your channel in the first place, and what advice would you give to a new starter? I'm not asking for myself, but just curious, brilliant content and work ethic. Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you. I appreciate that. What inspired me to start my channel? Well, I didn't watch many. I always wanted to do something different. I've always been like that. Ever since I was a kid in school, I always wanted to do something different. I didn't want to be someone who, and this is what I do now, but obviously outside YouTube I do work the normal 9 to 5 office life, and I don't see myself doing that forever. I've always kind of said that in my own life. I've never saw myself doing that. And even when I was a kid in school, I never really wanted to go down. I always wanted to do things different. I never really saw myself as being, the kind of run of the mill, you finish school, you do this, you do that, you do this, so on and so forth. I always was like, I quite fancy going that other road. Yeah, it looks a bit windy and bumpy, but we'll probably have some fun nonetheless. That's kind of always been how I've done things. In terms of inspiration, the first content creator in terms of YouTube boxing I ever watched was Hatman, and I wasn't intentionally looking for him. I was looking for I was looking for highlights of the Kubrat Pulev Vladimir Klitschko fight, and just seeing the thumbnail was a reasonably short video, so I was thinking, oh, that's the highlights. Boom. Started hearing this accent, which is a kind of Caribbean cross with South London accent. That was like, okay, this definitely isn't the highlights, but that the accent, the voice just kind of captivated. I was like, I'm gonna have a listen to this, and then I was like, I want to listen to more. So I listened to him, and I found Box Talk with Ade and Ryan. I also listened to Box and Gossip. Box and Gossip hasn't been around for a long time, but I listened to him. I always disagreed with Box and Gossip so much. I always used to like I love listening to him, but God, I would disagree with him on a lot of things. Listen to The Wire, people like that, and I remember thinking, like, I could probably do this. And I was thinking that as far back as kind of 2015, 2016, I was thinking I could probably do this, but you know how it is. You think something and you don't follow through. I think a lot of people think they can do something, but they don't follow through. And in 2018 is kind of when I started. Well, in 2018 is when I made the channel, but I really didn't do anything with it until 2019. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I didn't really start doing anything with it until 2019. Made it in the start of 2018, and then I actually changed the name to G-Man Boxing and uploaded a couple of videos the kind of back end of the summer in 2018. Again, didn't really just did them. There's only a few videos on here from 2018. And then I went to 2019 with a goal of, right, let's do something. Let's try and see what we can do. 1,000 subscribers would have been amazing, but it was like, let's just try and do something. And then obviously I sent Ade an email, had a chat with him over the phone, and when you just that's why we're like good mates nowadays. When we just chat and we might not see each other for a couple of months, but when we do in person, it's just like hugs and everything. It's crazy. Just hit it off instantly. He mentioned me, and it started the ball rolling, and we were able to do 1,000 subscribers by I think October, which was crazy. So I guess long-winded one, but that was the inspiration on that. And advice I would give for new starters: don't be too optimistic early on. What I mean by that is boxing is quite niche. If you're talking about just boxing content, boxing is quite a niche sport, so it's going to take a while to build a following. It is, and sometimes you need to sacrifice certain things in order to see growth. It's as simple as that. Even now, I still sacrifice a lot in terms of, I could go out and watch these fights, I could go out with my friends, I could go and do this, I could do that, but I would sooner stay home, if especially it's a big fight, and do a watch along or do a post-fight review, like that, and try and help build the channel, because it benefits me. And yeah, it's a sacrifice. Look, I'm still quite young, reasonably young anyway. I'm getting older, but I still I can do, when I'm older and I've done what I want to do, I can miss a fight or two then, and maybe I don't have to do it. But for the time being, I'm still in that mindset of, try and maximize everything. And that's the advice I'd give. Don't expect much too soon. If you're nervous in front of the camera, because people want to do it, if you're nervous in front of the camera, don't go on camera. Work your way into it. I didn't go on camera for the first year nearly, and I had no issue going on camera when I did, probably because I was used to just talking into a mic already. Only difference was, instead of looking down at the phone or iPhone I was using, I'm looking into it now. So, just do what works best for you, trial and error, see what happens, but, just stay at it. You don't know, just stay at it and just do. People should know, do content that people would want to listen to. And if you have a little bit of charisma, if you think you do, if you have a bit of, character there, it'll show. So that's the advice I'd give there. And I'd always be open to helping anyone if they need help. So, my DMs on Twitter are always open. They're X, it's called nowadays. Daniel says, what do you generally think of AJ facing Fury? Because to be fair, I think Fury will be far too much for Usyk. He is simply too small, and everyone will say it's 100%. Well, I don't think Usyk will be too small. I really don't. Steve Cunningham gave Tyson Fury all sorts of issues, and he is the same height as Alexander Usyk, but he is a much, much smaller man. I mean, he was weighing in to heavyweight fights at like 204, 205. I think he weighed 210 for Fury, so he's not a big man. Usyk is a bigger man. And Usyk is a much... Steve Cunningham was a good fighter back in the day, but Usyk is leveled better. It's night and day. I think that in terms of AJ facing Fury, I've always fancied Fury in that fight, but if Fury is on the decline, I would favour AJ. And, seeing how AJ's been looking lately, and I know Francis Ngannou, he was supposed to do that. Otto Wallin, he knew him, Helenius, etc. We would need to see Joshua against a real top 10, like a Hrgovic, to really gauge where he's at. But, just based upon what I've seen from both guys in their respective last fight, which was against the same guy, you would make Joshua favourite. But, if the Fury who fought Wilder, I don't know if we have that, but if he turned up against Anthony Joshua, yeah, I'd be making Tyson Fury favourite. I would. I genuinely would. Which active British boxers, and this is Aiden YouTube 7484, which active British boxers that are currently fighting do you think will end up in the Boxing Hall of Fame? It's not, Joshua will end up and Fury will, definitely. It's not a massive job to get into the Hall of Fame. If you have a somewhat decent career and you make a name for yourself, as in obviously at the highest level, they're not going to just let in just anybody. But, those types of guys could. I think if a Telma has the career I think he may very well have, he could find himself in the Hall of Fame, certainly. So people like that, yeah, I'd be taking them. What's your earliest memory of watching boxing by Joe Jackson? Earliest boxing memory? Do you know what? I don't remember the first boxing match I seen. I really don't. I don't remember, because I used to sporadically watch boxing. I knew, even when I was a teenager, in the early kind of 13, 14, I knew Floyd Mayweather, Ricky Hatton, people like that. They were names at the time. I remember the build up to that fight. I would say my earliest boxing memory of it is not necessarily watching a fight, but I was only 7 years old at the time, and we were one of the first houses in like our area. We may have even been the first to actually get Sky in, like the full Sky package, because a lot of people in my local area, and my local area still is, it's got a little bit bigger now because they built on, but back then it was like maybe 100 people in the area I'm in. And we were one of the first houses to get Sky, might even have been the first. And I remember it was the build up to Tyson Lewis, and I don't remember who it was, but they picked Lennox Lewis, they picked Mike Tyson to knock Lennox Lewis out in 3 rounds. This was on Sky Sports. That's one of the earliest memories. And when I look back now, I'm like, that must have been Colin Hart. I look back there, because I was only a kid, only 7, and I just happened to hear it, and I was like, that must have been Colin Hart. That's something he'd say. That's something he'd say even back then. But that's one of the earliest memories. Again, earliest fight, I can't remember. I don't remember the first fight I watched. I remember seeing some of Ricky Hatton's. I remember a couple of fight nights, Friday fight nights, which were, kind of Frank Maloney, Dave Colwell, stuff like that, Frank Warren. But I don't remember. That's probably the earliest memory in boxing that I have, but the earliest fight, I genuinely don't remember. If the 5 versus 5 Queensberry show catches fire, would you rather see 5 versus 5 rematch or take on some boxer stable fighters? I'd rather see if the rematch, because I seen Ben Shalom mention 5v5 matchroom versus boxer. I think that would be a fairly, dependent, but his stable is not, a who's who. Do you think it's completely crazy, and this is from Olivia, and by the way, that was DJ's channel who asked the Queensberry question, from Olivia. Do you think it's crazy that male fighting females is even considered? Yeah, I do. I want to keep it without going into, going down that road, but it is. It's absolutely ridiculous, the fact that that's even talked about, it's even considered nowadays. And society is in a strange place. And that's being generous. I always look at the way, like, when I look at certain things people do and things they endorse without even knowing it, they're kind of endorsing male fighting female. I know that sounds weird, and a lot of people would say, but we're not. Well, I go to some people like even around like where I'm from, and I would say, are you for a male fighting a female if he identifies as a female? They'd say no. I'd be like, so a male can't do that, can he not? No, of course not. Okay, why do you have gender pronouns in your bio on Instagram? Well, I don't. Well, so that's what you identify as. Well, no, I'm a man. Well, like, why do you need your pronouns to tell me that? I already know that. Oh, well, it's what you do, isn't it? It's like, do you see what you're doing? Just don't do it. Because in a way, I know you're not for it, but in a way, without you really knowing, you're just you're almost kind of given, almost kind of accepting that, yeah, that's all right. I know it's not, but it's kind of what you're doing by that. Joe says, do you think F1 has lost its identity? I like the sport too, but it's not been the same for a long time. I get where you're coming from with that question. I get you there. I think F1 lost its identity a long time ago. And I don't even think, I think you're going back over a decade really to when you really started seeing it. I've nothing against some of the countries that it's going to, but F1's roots is in Europe. It really is. And we've lost, F1 started losing its identity. I want to say going even back to the 2000s. I know people would say, and I love that era, but when you look at what they did to the old Hockenheim ring, I mean, that people love that track, and I don't particularly like the new Hockenheim. Well, it's not really. It's 20 years nearly. It was over 20 years now. They had a wet dry race, which wet dry races are always brilliant, but the track itself is nothing special. The old one was just brilliant, and it had character, and that's something F1 is missing, and it's been missing it for a long time. And I think you can go back to the early 2000s. You started seeing the character leave it. The V10s went. They tried to get rid of slicks. They brought them back, but then it was, we're in a situation where cars can't follow, and they got rid of refuel, and now it's all about safety. He hit a barrier if it wasn't for the halo. It's like there was mega crashes in the 90s. Mega crashes with cars that weren't as sturdy as they are now with no halo. They were absolutely fine. They had gotten the spare car and walked away. It is, yeah. I think the identity is going a bit, and with someone like Dominicali in charge, I fear for the future. I remember Murray Walker, RIP, once said, if the era he commentated in is peak F1, he's glad to have commentated in it because he doesn't envision peak F1 coming anytime soon. It has lost its identity, yeah, and it's sad. I still love it. I'll always love F1. Original Individual says, will Kell Brook stay retired or return? Well, I hope he does stay retired for his sake. I think that he left doing what he wanted to do. He beat Amir Khan. He always wanted that fight. It's been 2 years, and I don't think he needs to. I really don't think he needs to come back. I hope he doesn't. I hope because very few get to go out on a high. And I know Kell Brook didn't go out as world champion or anything like that, but that's a high. Going out beating your nemesis almost, that's a high. So I think that's a great way to bow out, and I hope he stays it. St. Pep says, who wins in a boxing match between Ty M. Boot and Porky from Porky's Corner? The boxing fans win that one, mate. The boxing fans win that one. G-Man, do you reckon, and this is from Zach Cunningham, do you reckon you could take Clarissa Shields one-on-one, man-to-man? Personally, I'd have G-Man on the jab. Mate, I would never get in the ring with a female, ever, because I wouldn't even attempt to throw a punch at her. No way. Not a hope. And when people say stuff like, I'd like to see Clarissa, no, you wouldn't. You don't want to see Clarissa Shields in there with a man. I know she gives it all that you don't want to see that. You don't want to see a woman get ironed out by a guy. Lee says, what is the best fight you've been to live for the atmosphere? My top two were Ben McClellan and Lewis versus Ruddock. Both great to be at. To be at either of them, I mean, Ben McClellan, that would have been insane. Insane. I wasn't, well, obviously I was alive when Ben fought McClellan. I was only one, but I can imagine what that would have been like, and I don't even know if I was alive when Lewis fought Ruddock. I don't even know if I was born then. I forget what year that was. But the best one I've been to live has been Frampton versus Jackson. Fury fought Pianetta on the undercard. That was a mega atmosphere in Windsor Park. It was mega. It absolutely bucketed rain. That's the best one I've been to. I've been to York Hall, which is brilliant. I've been to the Copper Box. I've been to the OVO. I haven't been to the O2 yet. And they've all been good. I've been to small hall shows here in Ireland and they haven't been amazing. I've been to them in Dublin and in Cork. They haven't been amazing. That was the best. Simon Harris, will you vote Fine Gael? Not in a million years. JD says, what's Fidel Riley ceiling? Yeah, I won't be picking him over Isaac Chamberlain personally. I think Chamberlain has the beating of him. Probably domestic British level, I would imagine. Scott McDougall says, gee, when you move to London, will yourself and Ade work together more? You have that down twice. Yeah, well, obviously we've talked about it. We've talked about that's, it's part of the reason why I want to get over there so we can do more stuff together. We've talked about that, and we could potentially do some work together this week. It just depends on what way time is for both of us. So yeah, that's obviously going to be a big part of it. But I like London. I like the city. I like the feel there. I don't know why. It just has something for me. I like it there, and I think that every time I've been there, I've always been happy. So I think for me, from a growth point of view, I need to be there more so than anything else. Edward says, where does the work ethic come from? You upload good content regularly. Where does the motivation come from? I guess seeing the channel grow, and once I hit 10,000, that was a big milestone. It was a big moment, and it was I was so happy. I can't put it. I was so happy when I hit 10,000, and now I'm nearly at 20. It's crazy, and I guess because I'm always kind of like, if I do a video, it'll either get a 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 views, and it'll do good, or it'll get more, and let's see what happens. And when I see the subs grow and I see the channel do well, that's the motivation, and I always just feel like I've wasted a day if I've not uploaded. I've got videos recorded already that I could upload tomorrow, and I'll still probably record after doing this, because I try and I don't want to just chuck loads of content out. I do want to obviously try and keep it quality, but I also don't want to be inactive, and me and inactive don't go hand in hand. But like, if I do 2 days, I'm thinking, geez, that's bad, George says, gee man, I see you've done crime videos, not for a while and probably not anytime soon. Dennis Raid or BTK, have you looked into him? Yeah, I have actually looked into him. He is a very interesting character, a horrible man, monster, if ever there was one, but his story is very interesting. Certainly he is a complete psychopath. It's just, you don't, to do what he did, but to talk about it as candidly as he did, he sounds like someone describing, if you've ever seen his trial, he sounds like someone who is describing changing a tire. It's so matter of fact that it's just so cold, and just he talks about the crimes he committed. It's remarkable in a bad way, not in a good way, that there are people like that. And his background is a pretty good background. There's no real trauma there. There's no abuse. There's no anything. When you hear of some of them, some serial killers who've been, certainly in America, you look at their background and you're like, yeah, that's not good. If you have a psychopath, because psychopaths are born, they're not made. If you have a psychopath and you bring them into a troubled background, where there's abuse and stuff like that, but that may be what turns them into a violent one. But with Raider, there isn't that. There's never anything like that in his. He speaks in interviews, and he's spoken about being dropped on his head as a child, and there is a theory that serial killers have suffered damage to the frontal lobe. I would say with him, maybe, because his background just seems altogether fine. The narcissism he has, because he's still alive, he's in jail, is unparalleled. He was, it's honestly remarkable. And how he was caught, a lot of people maybe wouldn't read too much into this if they have researched Dennis Rader, but he was caught in 2005. He resurfaced after 20 odd years. He still was committing the odd crime between then, and he started playing cat and mouse with the police, leaving packages for them to find and leaving letters. And he asked the police if he could communicate through a floppy disk or if it could be tracked. And he asked the police to put a post in a paper, and he wanted to be referred to as Rex. Rex, for those who don't know, is Latin for king. And that's obviously how he's seen himself. He's seen himself as the king. So and of course they were obviously going to tell him, oh yeah, of course it can't be traced. Of course it can't be traced. And they addressed him as Rex. He sent the floppy disk and he's in jail now. But yeah, very interesting character is BTK. Horrendous individual. And honestly, just horrific. Joshua says, what was the first boxing match you watched? Again, I've already answered that. I don't remember, mate. Honestly, I genuinely don't remember. Italian Love, greetings from Italy. Is YouTube a real income source or just throw away money? Lately it's been very good. You know, it's not, well, if every month is like last month, you could argue it's livable. Yeah, genuinely, if I make what I made in March every month, you could live on that. You couldn't live on it in a place like London, but yeah, you could live on that. But it's not going to be like that every month. And I think last month was a anomaly rather than it being a regular thing. But yeah, since the back end of last year, it's been good, but it's not been, again, it's not been livable. But you know, I could easily pay what I made last month. I could pay rent in London and still have a little tiny semblance of money, not much left over. So I'm not going to divulge how much it makes, but yeah, it is an option, but again, it's not a quick overnight. Certainly, if it's boxing, boom, there you go. I mean, it took me 5 years to see kind of numbers like that, so it's not an overnight, boom, there you go option. But yeah, for some it might be if your genre is football or something. You said before you boxed yourself, what was your best punch? Definitely the left hook, Shane. Definitely the left hook. If you had to give yourself stats on a computer for speed, power, ring IQ, and stamina, what would it be? Probably not great, a lot of them. Stamina wasn't too bad. Ring IQ wasn't great. Power was okay. Speed definitely wasn't there. I always had, ever since I was a kid, I've always had slow feet. And I've never been the quickest. You know, I might look in somewhat decent shape, but I've always had slow feet. I've never been the quickest runner. I've always had slow feet. And in a boxing ring, yeah, I noticed it. I noticed that was a problem. Callum Hayes says, who's your favourite fighter, Irish fighter, boxer, and who's your current all-time favourite Irish fighter? Actually, for slipping my mind now, I'm forgetting his name. I'll tell you it here because I know who he fought. He fought Benny Leonard, and his name is just escaping me. But if you've ever heard of Benny Leonard, and Benny Leonard was a boxer. He came around in the 20s. And then he ended up coming back in the 1930s, and it was Jimmy McLaren. It's only come to me there, but he's Ireland's greatest fighter, in my opinion. He's Ireland's greatest fighter. He is. And he'll always be probably my favourite. He'll always be my favourite. He fought in the 30s. And in terms of current favourite, Paddy Donovan. I like Paddy Donovan. I like Gary Cully. I've had a few DM interactions with him on Instagram when I used Instagram. So I always like to see Gary Cully do well. I'll still be objective and say I think he got lucky in his last fight. I didn't think he lost it, but I think he was lucky. That could have been a lot worse for Gary Cully. So they would be probably the two main ones I like. There's also a fighter who I spent some time in the gym with called Daniel O'Sullivan. He's 4-0. He fought on the Dylan White show a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to see him do well. He's a good guy. I'd like to see him do well. WRLFC says, I'm a new subscriber, not sure if you've answered it. Who is your favourite boxer of all time and why? God, there's so many, man. There's so many. Arturo Gatti is up there. I just love Arturo Gatti. Go back and watch his fights all the time. I like David Haye, even though he was a less than truthful individual. I always liked him. Something about David Haye I always liked. Roy Jones, Muhammad Ali, those guys, George Foreman. Big fan of George Foreman, actually. I always liked Andre Ward. I know a lot of people didn't, but I always liked his style. I could watch Andre Ward. A lot of people found him boring, and yeah, I could sit and watch Andre Ward, no problem. I love big punchers. there's a lot of fighters nowadays who I enjoy watching, but I try and kind of separate that now, because obviously I want to be as unbiased and as objective as I can be. So I try my best to like not let my feelings for the fighter, if there's a fighter I really like and I want to see him do well, I try and say like, right, look, realistically, do I think he'll do this? No. And that's that. What's your pound for pound top 10? Orman asks. I've said this before, I don't normally do pound for pounds, to be honest with you. I think it's very abstract. I would say that you would have Usyk, Crawford and Inoue as the three best fighters in the world. You have them in whatever order you want, and then you kind of go about it. I've never been a big fan of pound for pound. So for me, I couldn't accurately give you a pound for pound, but I would say they are the three best in the world. Do you think Tyson Fury would face Joshua even if he loses to Usyk? I see him losing and retiring. Obviously, I hope he sees the AJ fight being too big to avoid. I can't see it happening, Sky Hill asks. I think the fight's always there if Fury wants it. Depending on the nature. Look, if he goes in against Usyk and he gets absolutely smashed to pieces, which I don't think will happen, but if it does, then I'd see him just retiring. If it's close, if it's competitive and he loses a close decision, I think he'd take the rematch. I do. I think he'd take the rematch. And would he go with the Joshua fight? I don't know. Maybe he'd see the Joshua fight as being easier. Maybe he would. But if he gets absolutely destroyed, no, I think he'll just sail off into the sunset. Top 5 worst heavyweight champions in history. 2 of them have been in the last decade. Charles Martin and Bermane Stiverne. Poor heavyweight champions. A lot in the Klitschko era, you had the likes of, Sergei Lakovic. Primo Carnera was very bad heavyweight champion back in the 1930s. Who else? There was some weak heavyweight champions around. There have been some very poor one. Michael Bent wasn't any great shakes. I might even go with that. Adam asks, who is your current favourite darts players? Keep up the good work. Top 2 would be Gerwyn Price and Luke Littler. I always liked Luke Littler, and I know it's customary to like him now, but I rated him. I seen him in the Moda series even a year ago. I remember him in the WDF in Lakeside in 2022, thinking, God, this kid's talented. He doesn't look like a kid, but he's apparently 17. He behaves like a 17-year-old, although he's mature for a 7. Like, there's some immature. There's darts players in their 20s who are very immature, and Luke Littler doesn't go into that mold. So I like Luke Littler. I like Gerwyn Price. I always like seeing Johnny Clayton do well. I think Nathan Aspinall is very good. But they'd be my top 2. I think Gerwyn Price, I don't understand why people don't like him. I know he's cocky, but I like that. I like seeing the fact he's confident and he's loud, and he's a great darts player. Say whatever you want to say, he's a great darts player. So they'd be my 2 favourite. Luke Littler and Gerwyn Price. Finbar asks, do you think any fighter should get an instant 5-year ban from boxing if caught with PEDs, and all exemptions should be made public so everyone knows who's taking what? You see, if the exemption one is tricky, because I don't really agree with someone having to disclose any medical exemptions. That should be between the person and their doctor, basically. It should be private. But if you are caught, should you be punished? Yeah, you should be. There shouldn't be any way to avoid it. Should it be a lifetime ban? I don't know how you do that. I think that if it's a first time offence, it shouldn't be a straight maybe 5-year ban, maybe a year, 18 months. And then if it's a second time, then yeah, it's going to be a lot more severe. Because I think that with some people, you can have... Look, mistakes happen. People F up. Should you really give them a lifetime ban? Should you really give them a really long ban that maybe ruins their career if it's a once off and they don't reoccur? If they reoccur, then yeah, throw the book at them. But that's what I would say on that. As for an exemption being made public, I don't really agree with someone having to any medical. If they want to do it publicly and it's their choice to do it, then they should go for it. That's their choice. But I don't think it should be made public to people if the fighter doesn't want it. Or if anyone doesn't want it, quite frankly. Joe Stunner boxing. You're not the only one who'll be away next week. I'm off to Estonia for 5 days. Beautiful. I've not been, but that part of Europe is lovely from what I've seen. Might take some inspiration from you and do another Q&A. The last one seemed popular. Enjoy your time away. I will, mate. I'll give that one a I'll heart that comment, even though I'm deleting the thing, the community posting a wee bit. I might leave it up, who knows. You enjoy your time away, mate. And yeah, I got the idea from you, to be honest with you, mate. So I said I'll give it a go myself. M for Maroon. Best / favorite boxing movie? Probably The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg. I love that movie. Most enjoyable fighter to watch? Oh, there's so many. Probably Mateus currently. Being around professional boxing, is PEDs common in boxing as I experienced in a semi-professional boxing boxing in my own country? I'm around it, but not to that level to see anything like that happen, mate. So I can't really comment on that. I've not seen anything like that myself. Ben asks, "Hello, G-Man. Love the videos. I've seen you talk about being in the amateur gyms in the past. I was wondering if you had any pro." Definitely not pro. Had a few little white collar and just some like amateur shows, like little shows like that, but nothing major. And that was when I was younger, and I never see. I like training, but I never really had. I always went into boxing with the envision of doing something, but I never had the will to do it. But that's why I love doing this, because I have the will. If I could take the drive I have for doing videos and put it into boxing, I'm not saying I would have done anything, but I might have had a little career. I'm not saying I would have got to any level. Probably not. Probably would have been lucky to even get to domestic level, if even. That's me tooting my own horn. But I never had the drive. I have more drive to do this because I just much prefer doing this. I was going to say Simon Jordan. Simon Morgan asks, "How do you think Joe Louis versus Muhammad Ali would have fared if they fought today?" I think if they fought any time, I would have picked Muhammad Ali to beat Joe Louis. I always would have favoured Muhammad Ali to beat him. Edmund says, "Long time viewer, enjoy the content. Thank you, mate." I'm assuming you mean if a company, GBM, offered you a ringside interviewer gig, would you take it? Yeah, quite frankly, I would. It's just without even thinking. I would have to think. Obviously, like I'd have to think. Like, would it make sense financially? Would it make sense? Because if I was, say, living in the UK, would I have to carry on working a day job? Would I have to go part time? Because obviously, if you take something like that on, and like I've had people reach out to me and ask me, would I host podcasts? And like I've always said, like if I was in London, if I was in there, I'd be open to hosting a podcast, I'd be open to hosting something. And some people have said we have a studio, and I've always said I'd be open to doing it. Yes, of course, but is it gonna? I don't want to sound big headed, but is it going to benefit me from a financial point of view? Because am I taking time away from paying my bills to do that? And I'd always try and make time. But if it's a case of you need to be here at noon every day, and it's like, mate, I have to think between doing a podcast where I'm not getting anything and paying rent, it's like I'm gonna have to pay rent for the time being. Where does your love of history come from, and what's your favorite period to look at? Kiva asks. I don't know. I was always good at history in school. I always found it interesting, and then it just kind of grew as I got older. And favorite period would probably be ancient history, ancient Egypt, or Kemet as it was known, ancient Rome. Quite like ancient Rome, actually. Ancient world, Anglo-Saxon Britain, things like that. I like all that. That would all be kind of what it's in. Charles asked, "What do you do for work?" I basically look after accounts, government accounts now, at some hospitals, and just make sure everything is running smooth with them, that they're supplied, that their invoices are getting paid. If there's any credits done, I need to raise the credit and stuff like that. Just look after accounts. It sounds fun. It's not really. It's not really. It pays the bills, though. It pays the bills. And look, hopefully one day I'll have something else that can pay the bills. But for now, it's a good job. It's not bad. I don't complain. I'm not going in every day with a smile on my face, but I'm not. I've had worse, a lot worse. Sinead asks, "Is Tyson Fury a god?" No. Serious one now. Why? Seriously one now. Why channels like you and Hatman, Be Fair, and other nameless always side with Hearn or Heyman? Listen, I'm not gonna go and have a go at channels or anything like that. If some wanna, big up Eddie Hearn, they wanna big up Al Heyman, then they can. That's what they should do. If that's what they want to do, then that's what they do. For me, it's like I don't. At the end of the day, I don't know Eddie Hearn. I don't know Al Heyman. I don't know Frank Warren. I've been I've been in Eddie Hearn's presence, I've been in Frank Warren's presence, and I remember I actually was at a Queensbury press conference, and I didn't realize Frank Warren was behind me, and I said it was Anthony Yard was meant to be. It was the Joyce Zhang rematch. Anthony Yard still didn't have an opponent, and I go, it wouldn't be a Frank Warren card without his go-to to be confirmed. And I turned around, and he's literally standing right next to me, and I was like, crap. And he hoping me getting the interview today was gone. And he just kind of walked on, and I was just kind of like, oh, that was awkward. Of all the people who I had to stand next to and say that, it would be Frank Warren. Listen, if people like them for whatever reason, they can. Look, I don't know them personally, so I've no affiliation with them. So for me, it's like if I see BS, I'll say it. It's like with Ben Shalom and Eddie Hearn. I think Eddie Hearn's done a better job than Ben Shalom, so I'll say it. But Ben Shalom can always prove me wrong. What's this say? Redemption. Will there ever be a boy born who could swim faster than the shark? Shark boy. Maybe. If there is. I beat my girlfriend daily. Brilliant name. Wonder if... I'm assuming you're trolling with that. G-Man, what regrets from your youth? Oh, you're getting deep there. Do you have? Not to say you're old. Thank you. But when you were a teen or early 20s, many regrets or things you would have done different. Where do I start? Yeah, loads of stuff I wish I could have done different. But at the end of the day, I always look at regrets, or I don't know if I even call them regrets. I always look at things I would have done different and say, like a job or something, and say, well, if I had done something different, if I'd done this course instead of that, if I'd gone for this job instead of that, I might not be doing this. So I always look back on them and I always say, well, look, you're doing this now because you didn't do that. So do you really regret it? Not really. I'd rather be doing this than doing something else. The only things I kind of regret would be kind of, like yourself when you were young, you went for a certain type of girl and you're like, holy crap, what was I thinking? I done that many a time when I was young, and I done silly things. They weren't that bad. I was lucky a lot of the times. But yeah, it was never that bad. So is there regrets? Some, but they're not major regrets. They're nothing that are going to read. There's nothing that really madly impacted my life. Elba, I think they say that name. An unknown entity contact. Oh, this is a long one. An unknown entity contact you. They state they have the power of time travel and ask you to make a fight card called the one that should have happened. They offer you an unlimited budget and state they already have a headline fight. They would like for you to pick a minimum of 5 fights, any weight class to fill the card. The headline will be Tyson versus Tua. Who do you pick for fights? All fighters selected will be in their prime. An audience will predict and your audience will predict the winner from each bout. Alright. You know what I'm going to say? At 140, I'm going to take a current fighter. I'm going to take a current fighter at 140, Subriel Mateus, and put him in with Arturo Gatti at 140. I'm going to take Muhammad Ali versus Alexander Usyk. 3 more. I'm going to put Andre Ward in with Joe Calzaghe. I'm going to do that. A super middleweight. So this is interesting. This is a tricky one. I don't want this video to go on too long. I'm going to put George Foreman in with Larry Holmes. I like heavyweights. And I do Floyd versus Thomas Hearns. I want to see how Floyd would be able to get that pull. How is YouTube too sensitive for words like the Bob Marley? Taya Boots says some mad stuff, but I've seen people demonetized get videos like with limited ads for much less, and I don't want to take that risk. DTD says, my question is, when Hatman yawns, do you yawn too? Definitely not. Ben Green guy, okay, long time watcher since 2021. Thanks, mate. Been loving the growth you deserved. All right, thanks, mate. You mentioned you love history. Are you a gamer? And if so, You must be an Assassin's Creed fan. Yeah, I do love history. Absolutely love it. Am I a gamer? I'm not as big a gamer as I was never really a big gamer, but I was when I was a lot younger. Now I kind of casual the odd game now and again. And yeah, I obviously loved Assassin's Creed. The Ezio trilogy was my favourite. I love that character. I actually recently, I say I'm not big gamer, but I did recently replay the Ezio trilogy. I got it on the Xbox, and that game, for a game 2 came out in 09. Brotherhood is my favourite. Revelations is a kind of sad game. Although it's good, it's kind of sad because you're playing with Ezio in his 50s and you know the end is nigh. And you play that, you see that character get born, you play with him from 17 until he's in his mid 50s, and you're like, damn, you've played this character his whole life. And that they'll always be my favourites. I think 3 is underrated. I love Assassin's Creed 3. I like Connor. 1 needs a remake. It's the only Assassin's Creed game I'd remake. My least favourite was always Syndicate until Odyssey came along. But yeah, I love Assassin's Creed. I do. Bridge0370 says, who do you think will come out on top between Fury and Usyk? You're going to have to wait for my prediction video on that one, mate. I'm afraid you're going to have to wait for the prediction video on that one. Twatman21, have you watched enough MMA, UFC mostly to make videos, and would you make a separate channel for them or upload them on this one? If username hurts algorithm, read it as something else. No, I think you'd be alright with twat. I've said twat plenty of times on here. No, I've watched a lot more UFC. I will eventually do some videos on it. I wouldn't make a separate channel. I'd do them on here. I would do them on here. Bridge0730 has a couple of questions. Has 4 questions in a row. In fairness, does AJ deserve a shot at any of the heavyweight titles, or is he jumping the queue? Otto Wallin was highly ranked, but should Otto Wallin versus Morakasiev be an eliminator? I don't think so. He'll get a shot. Can the WBC? Can we think of the WBC belt as a serious belt anymore, as they appear to change the rules? They're hurting themselves massively with that one. Do you have any ideas on how to fix poor scoring? One easy fix is that there should be no contact with judges and referees with any promoter. That would be something I would add, and being scrutinised with their scoring would be the next thing. I have put 4 questions on here. Sorry, it's fine. I will stop asking. I will stop now after thinking, what can I ask you? Questions keep popping into my head. I watch you and Joe Stunner the most these days and would give you big praise for what you do. Mate, you can ask me as many questions, and thank you. I appreciate that massively. Thoughts on Joe Joyce? Thoughts on if Joyce fought Ruiz? Adam asks. By now, I might even still probably pick Joe Joyce, to be honest with you, because God knows what Ruiz is going to be like. Exo Doon says, what's your favourite boxer from each decade for the last 100 years? So let's just say 1920s till now. Dempsey, 1930s. It'd be so easy to say Joe Louis, wouldn't it? I'd say Jimmy McLaren. From the 30s. I would say from the 40s, from the 1940s. Ezra Charles was tremendous. Robinson in the 50s, Sugar Ray, of course. Ali in the 60s, and again Ali in the 70s. 80s, it would be Mike Tyson. I know it's a cliche, but it would be Mike Tyson. 90s, 1990s, Nas. It's gotta be. 2000s. Oh Jesus, that 2000s. The 2000s. That's kind of when I started really getting into boxing. Who was my favourite from the 2000s? Roy. Early 2000s. In fact, I might even say Roy might be my favourite from the 90s, because that was really prime Roy. I might change that and maybe put Gaddy in the 2000s. And then Canelo in the 2010s. And right now, there's a long way to go in the 2020s, but right now would probably be a Inoue. And speak of Inoue, Foxy Bingo, hey G man, who do you think would be the hardest fight for Inoue at 122, 126? Maybe Lopez at 126? I really don't see anybody giving him trouble at those weights, to be honest with you. I really don't. I have 2 more left. Kieran McDermott, Would you like to see Andy Lee focus more on being a trainer? I think he is fantastic for the sport, and as a mentor, having Donovan Parker plus Quigley and Dunleary is great. They're doing well, but he seems to have pulled to the zone a lot, even Morecambe. I think he should go 100% and expand his stable. I think he would really suit southpaws who don't naturally walk down their opponents, Ryan Garcia, Josh Taylor, etc. Yeah, I've been impressed with what I've been seeing of Andy Lee. He works on the zone. He obviously likes his punditry. But yeah, from what I've seen, Quigley is what he is. He's not particularly amazing, so I don't think he can do much with Quigley. But Donovan and Parker, he's done some good work with. And yeah, someone like a Josh Taylor, that could be interesting to see him work with. And yeah, I know he bases himself in Dunleary and then does some stuff in Morecambe. I wouldn't base a camp in Dublin. I would base it in the UK because the sparring is just going to be easy to get sparring partners over there, because you can get a lot of them up and down the country where a lot of them have to fly and pay for hotel accommodation in Dunleary and stuff like that. Dunleary is beautiful. It's a beautiful part of Dublin. Last one, Cobb Metal 1. If Fury loses to Usyk, would you say he's the most rated fighter of all time? Not saying he's not good, he obviously is, but some people were calling him the best just a short while ago. A lot of fighters are overrated. You know, people will say Anthony Joshua is the best of this era, even though he lost twice to Alexander Usyk. You know, Fury is a good fighter. Do I think he's the most overrated? It's only really his fan to overrate him. I think the average fan knows that Fury is good, but he is not at that level yet. He can't even be spoken about it. He could get there. He could potentially get there, but I don't think he will. I wouldn't say he's the most overrated of all time. I would argue it's Mike Tyson. To be honest with you, I would actually argue the case that it's Mike Tyson who's the most overrated heavyweight of all time, because his fans literally think that he could come back now and clean the division up. Like, he was a good fighter, a great fighter, but he wasn't that good. Even in his prime, they're like, he was unbeatable with like Kevin Rooney. Why didn't he go back to Kevin Rooney when, you know, he came out of prison? He didn't. You know, I think Mike Tyson, his style had a shelf life. There was ways to beat him, and Buster Douglas found out how. He did what people like Bone Crusher Smith did, and to an extent what people like Tony Tucker did, and he just did it better. Simple as. And Bone Crusher Smith just held. What he did is he shut Mike Tyson down, his inside game down, and obviously he didn't try and win, but Buster Douglas was able to do that. He was able to use the jab. He was also able to, he worked when Tyson didn't want to, and all that paid dividends in the end. So that's what I got to say on that one, and that was the last question. So I think we've just done it in just over 50 minutes. So if on Friday you are going to have a listen to this, I hope you enjoy it. I will leave it there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you want me to do a part 2, let me know, and we'll do it sometime, maybe in the future, maybe in the distant future, who knows. But that's that. That was a fun. That was a doozy of a video, wasn't it? I sat in the same position pretty much the whole time. My leg feels like it's about to fall off now. I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Peace.